Oh, he's the shove-it man!
The Hawk is back again today with yet another gimmick that has not had much attention, because that's what I do. Make sure you hit me up on social media. I usually respond best on Insta. People usually just use it to send me threats like they're going to hit me with a brick. Yeah, like that'll ever happen. Today's video is one of the most bizarre gimmicks in TNA history. It's right up there with the Angelina Love and Winter Zombie lesbian time-travelling drugging gimmick. Some of you know today's wrestler as Dexter Lumis in the WWE, but in TNA he was known as Samuel Shaw, and he was one creepy bastard. Shaw's first official TV appearance was when he rocked up in TNA through their failed gut check program in 2012. It was supposed to be a chance for young wrestlers from the indies to get their shot at earning a TNA contract. Most of the signings that they made through this segment though were complete failures, but the biggest success from the program was probably Sam Shaw. He was kind of generic at first, as demonstrated by being called just Sam Shaw. That's not edgy or interesting. What kind of a boring name is Sam? He had a surfer skater gimmick, but no one really cared about that, and it seemed that he was just going to be another gut check signing that was destined to sit in TNA developmental doing absolutely nothing for the rest of his career. Then everything changed towards the end of 2013. Shaw was randomly being interviewed at home by Christy Hemme. We hadn't seen him for a while, so it was completely random. He asked Christy to call him Samuel Shaw from now on. It appeared that Shaw was a budding artist, so I'm not sure why he was bothering to try and become a wrestler. He got Christy Hemme's phone number and then he started showing signs of OCD by getting upset about the arrangement of his pens. They proceeded to go on a date. Something seemed a bit off with him though, because he was polite but really boring. Then he started threatening the waiter for looking at Christy Hemme. 2014 rolled around and Sam Shaw made his wrestling debut. He had clothes on that no wrestlers in their right mind would ever wear. He basically looked like Dexter from the TV program of the same name. His hair was gelled down so tight it looked like it was cutting off the blood supply to his head. He also looked like he was from the 1930s. Shaw worked a slow wrestling style while staring at Christy Hemme after every move. He used a sleeper hold as his finisher, which judging by the sound of the crowd is what happened to not just the wrestlers he faced, but also the complete TNA audience. Despite how freaked out Christy Hemme looked, she continued to date Sam Shaw like a complete idiot. Then the weirdness ramped up. Christy went back to Samuel Shaw's place where it turned out that he had a secret shrine for her. The character work was really well done by Samuel, to be fair. The issue was inconsistency. He debuted at the start of January, but he only had one match and a combined 5 minutes of TV time in the entire month. This left people wanting to see a bit more of Samuel, because they kept forgetting he existed. February didn't get much better in terms of TV time for Samuel, however we did get some progression to the storyline. Shaw's jealousy got completely out of control as he attacked anyone who spoke to Christy. This happened to Mr. Anderson, who at this point his hair had turned green from all the mould from the TNA locker room. Christy Hemme got injured in the attack and Shaw seemed like he wanted to try something with her backstage while she was knocked out. Hemme was now starting to show signs of being scared of him, and there would be no further dates for Samuel. Shaw tried to convince Hemme that Anderson was after her, but he didn't manage to convince her. Anderson pretty much destroyed his whole gimmick in 10 seconds by calling him the creepy bastard. Hey, I thought that was Christian. Out of the blue, and despite being obsessed with Christy Hemme, Shaw suddenly decided that she was a slut who was always available. And let me tell you about this Anderson versus Samuel Shaw feud. It goes on forever. In fact, I'm not even sure if he faces anyone else in his time in TNA. The whole feud pretty much just consisted of Anderson making fun of Shaw, who was obsessed with Christy. And by the way, I know it's not a sleeper hold that he's using as his finisher, but it might as well be because it had the same effect. If we want to be nerds about this, it's called a katagatame. I think some people need to get a grip. I'm not WrestleLamia or twat culture. If you want to be battered by repetitive facts and details, go watch them. Not every YouTuber has to be the same, you know. I want to focus on the entertainment side of things. That's my job. There's some people who need to take a long look in the mirror and a hard punch to the gut. Wrestling has become a battle of who has the most knowledge, and it alienates normal people who just want to watch and enjoy it and not be made to feel excluded. This is how I came to the dance in the first place. People subscribe to me to focus on the entertainment aspects. Sorry, I've gone off on a rant again, haven't I? Jesus Christ. The feud seemed like it was going to come to a head at lockdown in a steel cage. Hemme was too scared to even be the ring girl at this point. Shaw started the match by climbing the steel cage and threatening to commit suicide. He said he'd throw himself off the cage unless Hemme came to see him. Anderson continued to make a joke out of the whole situation. The audience all tell him to jump, and Anderson tells him that all that will happen is he'll break his ankle and look like even more of a goof than he already does. Well, Shaw doesn't jump, and he doesn't break his ankle. If Shawn doesn't win this matchup now, I think it might be game over for him. Well, I can tell you that it was a slow, boring match. I can tell you that, like an idiot, Christy Hemme came out to watch. I can also tell you that there was a ref bump. A wild Slapnuts appears.
Double J, Jeff Jarrett.
I can also tell you that Anderson destroyed him and escaped the cage. But then Shaw managed to drag Christy into the cage, which caused Anderson to have to get back in the cage. Then Shaw choked him out and left the cage, and the ref woke up from the bump, so Samuel Shaw beat Mr. Anderson on paper. So he's won the match, Anderson's knocked out, and despite having that all done, he doesn't do anything to Christy Hemme at all. He just leaves. Couldn't he kidnap her or attack her or do something to make him look even more dangerous? He just looks like a joke who got a lucky win and now he's trying to leave with his tail between his legs. Why even fight Anderson in a cage? What was the benefit for him? Well, this feud doesn't end here though, not by a long shot. Samuel Shaw started to come to the ring with a Christy Hemme mannequin. For some reason after their cage match they then had a street fight. In the match Anderson threatened to punch the mannequin and then instead he gave it a kiss while Shaw screamed out and lost the match. This did nothing for their feud apart from making Shaw look even dumber. The dumbness continued as Samuel Shaw received a 1-week suspension for cornering Christy Hemme and shaving her ginger locks off. How does his actions only equal a 1-week suspension? Shaw returned from his suspension to have a straitjacket match with Mr. Anderson. I just want you to know that every week Mr. Anderson is out there destroying him on the microphone. Shaw looks dumb and weak. A straitjacket match is over when one wrestler has been locked in a straitjacket. It's a bit like a reverse bra and panties match. Shaw actually wins this match fair and square, although it was a bad match, it did give him some legitimacy. That soon disappeared though, as Christy Hemme seduced Sam Shaw in the ring. Whilst that was going on, a van is seen pulling up on the Titantron. It says it's from the Funny Farm. Hemme has to keep him distracted for a minute whilst Anderson jumps out of the van and comes to the ring. Couldn't Anderson have just got there sooner? Hemme's yelling all this sexual encouragement at him to try and make him keep his eyes closed. Then when he opens them, Anderson's there and his dreams have been ruined. He went from MILF to mould. Not only that, but she revealed as a special surprise he was being committed to a funny farm. Shaw did manage to escape though. We then got the joys of seeing Anderson going to Samuel Shaw's family home. Anderson meets his mum, who's a redhead, also called Christy. It was then insinuated that he sleeps with his mummy every night. A tour of his bedroom reveals that he was basically a little baby's room. Shaw then returns home and gets very upset. Samuel hugs into his mum's boobs and cries. Just when it seemed like this story couldn't get any weirder. Oh, by the way, it doesn't even make sense because twice we've been shown that Shaw has his own flat, but now apparently he sleeps in his mum's basement every night. Shaw and Anderson then clash again on pay-per-view, this time in a committed match. Shaw lost the match and was put into the van and taken away to the Asylum. Good riddance. Don't get too excited though, it actually gets worse now. So now we get segments in the Asylum. He's visited by Gunner who wants to be his friend. Gunner comes every week to visit him and tries to get him to talk. Anderson isn't happy that Gunner's doing this because Samuel Shaw's a creepy bastard. They're touching on their military past and Gunner's argument was that a lot of his brothers had mental health problems in the military and he believed he could help Samuel Shaw. Anderson says Shaw wasn't in the army and he didn't need his help and he was just a creepy bastard living in his mum's basement. It wasn't exactly entertaining to watch him play Go Fish with Gunner on TV. It would be more entertaining to watch paint dry. The decision was then made to release Samuel Shaw from the Asylum, despite him still being completely bonkers. They only agreed to do it if Gunner took responsibility for him. Shaw returned to TNA and apologised to Christy Hemme, but unfortunately no one trusted Sam Shaw after his previous actions. By now you might have noticed that I'm not showing you any match footage. Well, that's because there isn't any. He had about 18 matches across 2.5 years. That is terrible. How is someone supposed to get better in the ring where they barely ever wrestle? He's in a backstage promo one week and then he goes again for 2. It doesn't take long for Anderson and Shaw to come to blows again. This time it was completely Anderson's fault. Shaw tried to help him during a beatdown, but Anderson complained about it. Shaw even tried to break up the pin attempt on Anderson, yet everyone acted like Shaw was being a bad person again. Gunner stuck up for Shaw to be fair and he went against Anderson. He was 100% dislikable at this point and he'd given up in TNA. Anderson could have done a lot better in TNA and that's a damn fact. Shaw even simply went as far as asking Anderson to say sorry to Gunner for being a dick to him. Samuel literally had done nothing wrong for the last 6 months at this point. Anderson faced Shaw again, this time in an I Quit match. It was good to finally see a match, but Anderson continued making a joke out of him.
Taking the microphone from the referee I mean, is Brian Hebner going to allow this?
Say you quit! You quit!
The match was bad again. It was slow and it wasn't clear who we should be cheering for. Shaw eventually quit through the pain of an armbar and Anderson continued to attack him after the bell. What a dick. Gunner and Shaw continued to be friends, but Shaw seemed to be getting increasingly attached to Gunner. He even tried to grow in some facial hair like him and dress like him. Their association was starting to cost Gunner big time as he went on a losing streak and the friction started to ramp up. It didn't matter though, Shaw was still obsessed with him and got some of the ugliest tattoos I've ever seen. It literally just looks like someone chucked a bucket of black paint over him. He had losses to Abyss and Bram. He was a jobber who always had backstage segments. After that match with Bram, Brittany, aka Santanna Garret, came out to see if Samuel Shaw was okay. She was another one who'd been doing literally nothing apart from being weird in TNA and having a match once a month. After being bashed in the head with the pipe, I think it's a bit late for checking to see if he's okay. Gunner doesn't come to check on him at all though. She then becomes obsessed with Samuel and he turns on Gunner. He completely batters him with a steel chair and then he makes out with Brittany on top of Gunner's back. This was rather unusual. On a side note, how has this girl not gone further in wrestling? Plus she was rocking leggings long before they were everywhere and the Hawk became their biggest fan. Shaw justified turning on Gunner because he said he made him feel like he was a charity case. Gunner started the crowd off calling him a creepy bastard again. Brittany then stirred the pot and told Samuel that Gunner had been trying to come on to her. It was around this time that TNA started selling creepy bastard t-shirts. On that note, visit the Hawk store and if you don't, you're a whore. Price is now dropped. Gunner beat Shaw in a street fight to end the feud. And that was pretty much the end of anything in TNA for him. He had a few sporadic matches but no more storylines. Nowadays, Samuel Shaw wrestles in NXT as Dexter Lumis. Over on that show, people complain about his match quality, but trust me, they're far better than his TNA ones were, so you have nothing to moan about. He seems to be a little bit more high-flying, and his gimmick is exactly the same as it was in TNA. Gunner left TNA about the same time and he also ended up in NXT. Nowadays he wrestles as Jackson Riker. He seems to be a case of the grass isn't always greener on the other side, as during his time at TNA he was viewed as a future main eventer. Now he's not. Santanna Garret also left TNA at the start of 2015. What, with these three joint at the hip or something? She also eventually ended up in NXT, although she took a lot longer to get there. Anderson eventually absorbed so much mould from the TNA locker room that became a shell of his former self. He carried on in TNA for another year without having any more major storylines. Nowadays he's in NWA, a company that I plan on covering real soon. So it didn't exactly go well. It was an interesting character and it was good to see TNA at least trying something new and different. But as usual, the problem is they sat on the fence with the gimmick and didn't go all in. So here's the problem with the feud. First of all, Shaw didn't actually do anything that bad to Christy Hemme. Nothing we saw anyway. What did he do? He cut a tiny bit of her hair off and maybe scared her a bit. It's hardly that serious. This man clearly has special needs, but he was being bullied and humiliated every week on TV. It wasn't as if he was hard as nails beating up wrestlers with ease every week. Give the creepy bastard a break, Anderson. He was supposed to be someone to fear, but instead I felt sorry for him. Also, the feud of Anderson might have worked better if Anderson and Christy had been an item, or at least been established as friends. Instead it's like, oh, here's these two people, they're suddenly friends. And now Anderson is sticking up for a random person and having to do hardcore matches every week to protect this random person. Overall, the entire feud didn't make anyone involved look good. In fact, all of them ended up in far worse places than they were before. Shaw was supposed to be an exciting X Division competitor with potential. Gunner was starting to appear in the main event scene, and Anderson had just wound up beating the entire Aces and Eights faction on his own, so he was an important part of the show. And by the time this storyline was over, they were all nothing. Shaw lost every match he had that was important, and this was never going to help him, to be honest. And as for Santanna Garret, her legacy is in leggings and it changed my life forever. And if you don't agree with that, I'll pull out your feathers.